In this video, we're going to be using Figma to design this landing page for a cryptocurrency wallet app that we designed in a previous video. Let's kick it off, shall we? And for the next section, I want to do a little bit of an icon grid. So pressing F and looking for that desktop preset. And I'm just going to drag that in here. The height here, let's just pick a number out of the sky, 600 pixels. Let's Command R to rename this to icon grid. So the first asset we're going to drag in is our header to type scale. Just applying the layout grid here. We can apply this fill to surface. I'm going to center this off, drag it out to about there. And I'm just Command Shift clicking and I'm centering this off. So just pop that up the top there. All right, so with that type component in place, it's now time for us to create another component for our icon. I'm just going to press F for a frame here, holding down Shift, and I'm going to adjust this to 80 pixels. I'm going to ramp this radius up to 99999, just so that we get a rounded circle. And I'm going to set the fill here to blue. Rename this to icon holder. And next I want to support this with a headline and a little bit of text. So pressing T for the text tool, I'm going to type in header. Drop this down to header 3. Make sure we swap that fill over to the neutral. Looking a little bit big, so I might drop this back to header 4. Command D to drag that down. And I'm going to select text regular. Going to copy the text here. Command Shift V to paste that without styles. For this header, I'll write something generic like explore. With that in place, I'm just going to highlight these and go Shift A. So I want to give this icon holder a little bit of distance from the text. So I'm going to ramp this up to 24. But of course, we want this to be tightly related. So I'm going to shift click these two layers here, Shift A to put that in another auto layout frame and tighten that up to 4 pixels. I'm just going to Command Shift click, set this to fill container. And then if I click on this parent frame, I'm just going to set that to center. Now, just double checking this auto layout frame is going to be set to fill container as well. Awesome. Now we've got a pretty nice little icon component. Just going to rename this layer to copy. And rename this to icon feature. And I'm just going to ramp up the padding here to 16 pixels. Awesome. I'm going to click this icon feature and Command Option K just to turn that into a component. And now that we've got this icon feature in place, we're just missing an icon. Command / and search for Iconify. We're just going to do a quick search for search. If you remember, we used the search for our little explore feature in the app. Again, filtering by the carbon icon system, and we're dragging and dropping this search icon in. The other feature I'm going to highlight is the transfer. So I'm just looking for that arrows icon we used in the last video. Great. And now that we've got that in place, I'm also looking for something that would support a purchase. So maybe a shopping cart. Awesome. So we've got these. Again, remembering that we've got to flatten these so that they work properly. Vector is fine for a name. So I'm just highlighting these and hitting Command E just to flatten them up so that they're one layer. And this will help Figma with those overrides. I'm going to Command X this, jump over to our styles panel, hit Command V, and just going to drag this along. We're going to click this little down arrow here, and we're going to create multiple components. And there are our icons. So back to this icon feature here, I'm now going to just drag and drop in that search icon. Now the size, I'm going to center this off. I'm going to change that selection color to white. Again, that fill is bleeding through. So I'm going to go to the main component and just minus that off. Back to our design page, centering that off. 32 pixels is probably a little bit small in this circumstance, so I'm going to constrain the proportions and bump this up to 48. And again, just centering that off. And there's our little icon feature. Command D to drag the instance. And again, make sure that we're using the instance with the hollowed diamond, not the 4 diamonds. And there's our first icon. So I'm going to drag this off. I'm looking for 3 features I want to highlight here. So I'm using 4 columns. And we can just Command D that across. And it nicely fits our 12-column grid. So the other boilerplate copy I just want to quickly chuck in here is exchange. And I'll set this to buy. We can double click in and just change these icons over. So we'll get our shopping cart and we'll use our arrows. Awesome. We're done with this icon feature now. So I'm going to move this to our styles page. Make sure it really pop into a random spot. Back over to the design. So what I want to do now is just make sure that this section is following our 8-pixel rhythm. Now we know these components are because they're using the 8-pixel spacing values with the auto layout, but we want to apply that to the frame. So the easiest way I find to do that is to create an auto layout frame. I'm just clicking these icon features. I'm pressing Shift A just to wrap this into an auto layout. So we're just simplifying the layout for Figma, so that when we apply auto layout, things aren't going to shift radically on us. We can call this icon list. And we've got our section of 2 layers. So now I can hit Shift A and it's not going to move around too much. I'm just going to center this off. And the space I'm looking for here is probably around 64 pixels. And the gap between is maybe, might close that off to 56. Fantastic. And I'll just pop in a quick header here, something like super simple to get started. And there's our little icon grid section done. And now I'm just going to fill out the page with a couple of simple sections with an image and our copy component. So I'm just pressing F here, get that desktop preset 1440, and I'll drop it in here. I'm going to rename this to a media feature. And the height here, I'm going to use 700 pixels. Again, just picking a value out of the sky. The layout grid here is the 64 pixel grid, and we want to set that background to surface. Now to get this section started, we can just quickly copy this type component with Command C, and I'll just Command V to paste it in here. Command Shift clicking to get these 2 layers. I'm just going to change that back to a left align. Center that off. I'm going to update the copy here to something like shop anywhere. Visa is accepted. And just to save a little bit of time, I'm going to boot up the Lorem Ipsum plugin. Select this text layer. I'm just going to generate 3 sentences, unchecking, beginning with Lorem Ipsum. Just going to generate something in there just to save a little bit of time. Now, I'm very passionate about making sure the image placeholders follow an aspect ratio that exists in the real world. For our image placeholders for this landing page, I'm going with old school 4:3, so 400 by 300 pixels. I'm going to constrain these proportions. I'm going to Control G just to turn on that grid. And I'm going to just scale this out so that it hits, maybe 448. Now 4:3 is the aspect ratio for media content before we had widescreen. So it's a nice in-between if you're not sure your media is going to come from a videographer or if it's going to come from a photographer. So clicking this frame, again, we just want to make sure that this is following our 8-pixel rhythm. I'm going to click Shift-A. I'm just going to punch this up to 8080 and center that off. Great. We can get rid of auto layout now because we know that that fits. I just want another one of these media features, so I'm going to Command D to bring this down. And if I hit Shift-A to get this in auto layout, I can actually just press the left arrow key to get this on the other side. Pretty nifty. Now we just need some images. So booting up the Unsplash plugin. I'm going to search for point of sale. And I liked these images here. I'll grab this one. And I'm going to grab this one. Just dragging to get these out of the way. Now if I drag, holding down Command, it should eventually fit into that frame. Holding Alt and Shift so that we keep these in proportion. And I'll just get it to fill that height. Grabbing this one, same deal, holding down Command, getting it in that frame, holding Alt and Shift just to scale that into proportion. And I'll center that off. Easy as. Now that we've got these images in, I'm just going to flag these for export to. Because it's an image, we actually want this to be a JPEG rather than a PNG. It'll compress a little bit better. Export JPEG. And I'll just rename these to image. But we're not done with those yet. So I'm going to just quickly duplicate this circle with Command C. And I'm going to paste it in here with Command V. I'm going to just drag and hold Shift and scale that down. If you're not too careful, it's going to drop inside the placeholder. That's not what we want. So if you hold down space while you're dragging this around, it'll stay outside of the frame. I'm just going to drop it in about here. And again, Command open bracket just to get that behind the image there. And again, same thing again, just Command C'ing that, Command V to bring this in. And I might pop it over here. Keep it a circle. And Command open bracket to make sure that that pops in down the bottom there. And it's at this stage you're probably wondering why we've broken the grid here. And it's a very fair question. Ideally, you'd want to stick all your elements within the grid here inside the placeholder element. But in this instance, we're breaking the grid just a little bit. And we can do that because the element is absolutely positioned off a element that is at least constrained within the frame. The developer will actually be able to offset this with a pseudo element absolutely positioned, and it's going to be anchored to this image. It is breaking the grid a little bit, but it's at least doing it in a way that can be a little bit more manageable than, say, if this element was, not attached or anchored to anything, over here or something like that. So it's just one of those places or one of those ways that we can bend the grid for this design. And now I'm just going to jazz it up with a couple of more pseudo elements. So I'm going to jump over to our coin flip. So if I click in here, holding Shift just to get those two, Command C, jumping back over, and then Command V. We've got our two elements here. I'm going to detach these so that they're not referencing that other file, unlinking all those selection colors. And I'm going to wrap these in a frame. And then on that frame, I'm just going to press Shift A. I'm going to create a little bit of padding here, maybe just like 8 pixels. Let's see how that looks. And then for those two frames, I'm going to set that fill to surface Again, just really cranking the border radius so it looks like a circle. And I think that looks pretty good. With that in place, I'm going to apply our elevation. I might just click in here. Just rotate this one a little bit. Awesome. And I'm going to use these also as pseudo elements just around the frame. Again, holding space just to make sure that doesn't fall into frame. Name this to Bitcoin. Again, I'll select these two, go down, export, hit the plus here, go 2x for those high-res displays, and PNG. Same thing for this ellipse. We can export this as a PNG 2x, and this one PNG 2x. Now I'm going to use the scale tool just to punch this up just a little bit. And I'll switch these around. Not digging the rotation after all that. I'm actually going to group these because the developer won't need to extract these individually. They can be positioned together. Call this symbols. I'm going to Command C this, then Command V. Again, holding space just to keep that in the frame. Might just tighten that up. Great, and I think that's the media features pretty much done. I'll just overlap this just to create a little bit of visual interest. Great, so with that done, I'm just going to enter in and get rid of the export on these two inner layers. Great. Alrighty, now we're almost done. Now I'm just going to create a quick little reviews section. So pressing F, you know the drill, get that desktop preset, drag and drop that in. And I'm going to rename this to reviews with Command R. Going to change this height up to 600. We're just looking for this type header 2. So I'm just going to copy that and paste that in. And I'm going to rename this to our reviews. Again, for our frame, we'll create a layout grid. I might actually just drag this out so it's a little bit wider again. The fill for this one is going to be neutral, and double click in, and I'm going to swap this over to our surface color. And we're ready for our reviews component. So the first thing we're going to need is a little avatar image. So 48 pixels. Again, let's crank this up. Let's get a circle. And I'm going to press the T tool now. And I'm going to call this name. Left aligned, set this to white. And the header here, I think we're after is header 4. Rename this to avatar. With these two in place, just going to hit Shift A to get that into a frame, and then 12 pixels for that gap. Center align. I'm going to call this something like author. Now that we've got the author here, we're going to need some copy for our reviews. So pressing the T tool here, I'm actually going to boot up the Content Reel plugin from Microsoft. If I jump over to text, search for feedback, press enter. I think there's a yeah, let's do one of these, hey? Right, flicking this over to white. And I'm going to change this over to text regular. And we're going to need a star icon, searching for Iconify. We've got carbon already loaded here, so I'm just going to search for star. Drag and drop that in. Again, Command X, let's pop this on our styles page. Command V. And then Command Alt K to make that a component. Going over to our assets panel now, we're dragging and dropping that star in. Constraining these proportions and dropping this back to 20 pixels. Swapping this selection color over to white. And I just forgot to remove that fill. And popping that up there. It's probably a little bit hard to see. Might just bring this over just so it's easier to see. If I Command D this across, Command D, Command D, Command D, we want 5-star reviews. Highlight all these, Shift A. The gap for this, I'm probably going to set it 4 pixels. And there we go. I'll just rename this to stars. So we've got our stars, we've got our review, and we've got our author. So highlighting all these now and hitting Shift A. Now I want to enter in just specifically this text and this our author, I want to set to fill container. And now when we drag it out, it will constrain. So I want this to also be 4 columns wide. We'll do a 3 up. These values are a bit all over the place, so let's clean that up. So we're looking for a 24 pixel gap. The padding here will be 24 pixels too. Going to apply, see where that white's coming from. Change that to surface. Double clicking in. Now I'm going to just set a little bit of a background here. I'm going just so that we can see it and setting that to 16 pixels. I'm actually going to drop this back a little bit. I'm going to raise this up. Desaturate it just a little bit. Ramp this hue a little bit. Looking pretty good to me. So just to document this color style, I'm going to create a new color style here. I'm going to call this neutral muted. And just drag that up there. Great. And we have our review, Command R, review. I'm going to chuck in a little bit of a stroke here. Start with our surface shade. I'm actually going to make this a gradient, so I'm going to unlink this. Pop this over to linear. Probably a little bit too bright for our design here. Might ramp up the saturation just a little bit. That's looking pretty good there. I won't make this go fully opaque. I'll just drop this down to like a black or something. And again, just to make sure that we're documenting this somewhere, I'm going to hit plus. I'm going to call this gradient reviews stroke. Beauty. So we're going to make this a component. So I'm going to bring this out again and then Command Option K to turn that into a component, Command D. So I'll bring this in and Command D just to line these up with our little grid system here. And then Shift A. So I've got that in an auto layout frame now. I'm going to set this to fixed for the width. It's already registered our grid gap. So that means I can just basically Command D this to bring this along. And then if I switch this over to centered, we've got a nice little overlay. Again, I'm going to rename this to reviews list. I'll drag this down. Command D to bring this down. And I want to offset this now. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to delete one of these. And we've got 2 rows of full width reviews. I'm going to change that to 32. And because we want a closer gap between these elements and a wider gap between the text and these elements, I'm going to shift click these in and just put that in an auto layout frame. And now if I click on our reviews, go Shift A, got it in an auto layout frame, and I could center that off. So 56, 56, probably want to even punch that up even more. So let's plus this with 8, bring this up to 64. And that gap's probably a little bit too wide. I'll probably do 64 there. Now, it's very important to make sure that we've got a fixed width here and that these are overflowing. Because if this was obviously full width on this parent frame, it wouldn't have worked with that auto layout. So that's kind of the thinking between that fixed width element there and why it's not just simply full width. I'm going to rename this to, and there it is. I'm going to boot up the Content Reel plugin again, and I'm just going to, and now I'm just going to select every second frame here. I'm going to go over to image. And we've got avatars female, so that's already populated. And now I'm going to select every other image. I'm going to go avatars male. If I just click into these ones, and then go over to text and search for male name. And then if I click in here, do the same for the female names. There's our reviews done. Now that we've got this done, I'm just going to move this over to our styles page. If I click in here, hopefully it's... Now I can see that it's not flagging these for export, so I'm just going to Command Shift click each of these. Click plus, and then we can bump this up to 2 times for the PNG. I'm going to close that up real quick with Command A and then Command clicking these arrows. Now it's worth noting that reviews are actually a very demanding piece of content for a client's content strategy. So the shape of these reviews are obviously going to be very dependent on how you are actually collecting reviews. If you've got a lot of Twitter shoutouts, for example, for this client or for this application, this structure makes sense because you're most likely going to have a publicly accessible avatar, you're going to have a name or a username, and you're going to have a bit of a description. But if you're using a different service or if you're collecting feedback in a different way, for example, you might just have a first name, you might just have the copy, you might just have the star rating and a name. So the shape of this is highly dependent on the reviews that the client is going to be collecting. So if you know that kind of information up front, I wouldn't put the demands on a client like that. So we could actually just go over to our review component here, hide this little avatar, turn to instance, and the design isn't going to fall apart if they if sourcing a public profile image is too demanding on the content strategy team. So that's just something to keep in mind. So with reviews done, it's fine for our final section. So again, Command A, collapsing that up with Command clicking. Now it's time for our next frame. So pressing F, going into our desktop preset, I'm dragging and dropping that in. If I'm dropping this back to our neutral color, and again, let's pick a number out of the sky, 500. And now I'm going to reuse just really quickly some of the elements that we've been using already through the site. So I'm going to grab that first copy lockup, Command C, and then Command V to paste this in. I'm going to center that off. I'm going to double click in and just swap this neutral over to surface. Command Shift clicking and then center that off. Again, we just want something that is in our 8-pixel system. So 64 pixels from the top is within that system. Centering, aligning that with the constraints. We could probably fix up these constraints too. And you may be wondering why I'm spending so much time fiddling with all these constraints. And it actually really helps you out when you do a desktop to mobile conversion, which is what we'll potentially cover in a future video. So I'm going to just rename this to footer with Command R. I'm going to unlink this neutral. I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to color pick our theme, our brand color here. I'm going to drag this down to 10% or something. I'm going to set this to linear. I'm going to swap these two around. And hopefully that's just like a little bit of a, maybe swap that over to radial. Where'd that little white dot go? There it is. Let me just swap those around. Bump up this. And I'll just make sure it surpasses that. So we've got a little bit of a gradient there. I'm going to stretch this out. So applying the layout grid again. Stretch this off. I'm going to rename this to something like Get Started Today. Just that last word. Going to highlight with our blue. Going to punch in some boilerplate copy. For the final touch, we're just going to grab this logo up the top here. We'll actually grab this navigation section, Command C, Command V. I'm just going to pop this down the bottom here. Set that to white. I'll probably delete this. I'm going to set this to white. And we'll put in some legalese. So maybe terms and conditions. And for this one, privacy policy. Oh, we'll just put in a little bit of a line. We've got a width here of 1120, which is our full width. I'm going to set that height to 1 pixel. Set that to surface. I'm going to drag this in. Command X, Command V. And I'll probably pop it in there and just drop that down to 10% just with the keyboard. I'm pressing 1, maybe 20. That's too bright. 15%. Just punch in 1.5 on your keyboard. I might drop this down another 8 pixels. We'll just rename that to divider. Again, let's document this gradient for the developer. We'll just put this as footer gradient. So there's our design. So now that we've got that all together, it's time to reward all our hard work in terms of documenting these pieces. So if we run automatic style guides and generate that style guide, we've got all those pieces documented for our handover. And that's just the automatic style guides plugin. What I would also do with this, I would also jump over to the styles page. Just command zooming out here. Now that we've got all these icons in one place, I would actually highlight all these. We don't need the Iconify plugin anymore. We can minus that. And I'll just click plus on this icon and I'll set this to SVG. And that's all our assets that we need on this page. So now that we've been diligent in preparing these assets, the developer can hit Command-Shift-E and export all the assets that they need in one click. This is the icon system that they can export. And if they jump over to that design page and hit Command-Shift-E, they can also export all the assets from this page. It's just a really nice thing to set up for your developer. Oh, that's probably been annoying you the whole video. I apologize. Let's patch that up. And I might just change this copy around to no keeping fees. And that's everything, folks. There you have it, guys. That's how I would design a landing page for a mobile app in Figma. If you have any questions, please leave a message for me in the comments below. And until next time, happy designing.